actually invite you in, brother.
Hello, my name is Charlotte. Welcome to my channel. I am in a new house since last time I filmed. I moved. I'm sitting in the office that I use for my job, but you know, there's a good big window in here that's giving me decent light despite the fact it's raining. Forgive me if you can hear the rain. I don't have a microphone. Anyway, I am here today to talk about the 6 books that I read in January and February. I know 6 books isn't very much for a lot of people for 2 months, but it's alright for me. I had a really decent January and then everything slowed down in February. 1 in part to moving, 2 in part to the book that I chose to read. Alright, so let's get started. The first book that I read this year, I was camping in New South Wales with some friends and I'd taken a couple of books with me, and I'd read 1 book to finish the year with, and my first book of the year was You by Caroline Kepnes. I just brought a couple of thrillers with me on that holiday because I knew I'd just be, you know, wanting something to keep me interested and keep, you know, get me to sleep in the tent at night, and I had a cute little reading light. It's pink, and it was a good time. I didn't care that much for the other book that I read, but it did keep my attention, so, you know, I'd say that's a job well done. Anyway, You, I loved. It really surprised me. I really didn't know what to expect going into this. I'd never seen the show. I thought it was a really interesting concept. You is basically about a guy, an obsessive guy who meets a woman and tries to figure out the best ways to woo her by completely invading every aspect of her life, including getting rid of anyone who stands in his way. And I really loved this. There is not a single likable character in this book, and that really, really worked for me. I love reading about shitty people, especially if shitty things happen to them. I think that Joe is an incredibly effective character. I think he's very manipulative to the characters in the book, to the reader. It reminded me in some way, this is going to sound crazy, it reminded me in some ways of how I felt when I originally read Lolita. How you'd feel one way after reading a bit, and the second you thought about it, you'd just be like, what are these, you know, what's this sympathy that I have for this terrible, terrible character? I don't want to compare Nabokov and Kepnes because that's not very fair, is it? She's doing a really great job. She's doing it a completely different way, but it just really reminded me of like the feelings that you'd have after being manipulated by a book, you know? I'm a massive fan of thrillers, so just the sort of change in perspective from it being from the perpetrator of the crimes, I suppose, was really good. I think that this probably is starting to date a little bit because I think it was it written in 2014, I think? Yeah, 2014 this came out, so the references are getting a little bit dated, and I think, you know, the longer this goes, the more dated the references are going to become. 2014 was when I was 18, so I get a lot of the references to the TV shows and things and that is talked about and, you know, derided by Joe in these books. Yeah, I don't know about the longevity of this book. I'm looking forward to reading the sequel. I think that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to checking out the TV show. I know that was very big, and I think they have made a lot of seasons actually, so we'll see how long I stick with that, but I'm looking forward to giving it a go. You know, I enjoyed everything I read regarding the things that he does in the novel, but he was very polished And, you know, we start off this book and it's essentially said that this isn't the first time he's done something like this. And I just think it would be really interesting to read a book where someone maybe thinks they're as on top of things as Joe is, but they're not, and everything just goes wrong. I think that would be really interesting. So then in January, I put together my TBR for the year, my book list, and I put them in little groups of 3, and rest of January I read that group of 3. So the first book of that group of 3 and the second book I read for the year was The Talisman by Stephen King and Peter Straub. It's a big one. I think the reason that I actually managed to get through this in a decent amount of time was the fact that my work didn't have much for me to do in January. So I was often just sitting around reading this, waiting to see if any work came through for me. It was good, it was relaxed. This book, how do you describe it? It's about a boy, and he has a sick mother. She's been moving him around the country trying to get away from somebody that they refer to as Uncle Morgan, who used to be in business with his father, but his father has since passed away. In the town that they're currently in a motel, he meets a man who essentially lets him know that there is another universe, and everybody in these universes has what is called a twinner. So there's a version of one person in each universe. What he finds out is that if he saves his mother's twinner in the other universe, then he'll be able to save his mother's life in his universe. His mother is incidentally the queen of the other universe. So the other universe is called the Territories, and you know, he goes there and it's a whole big adventure. Essentially, he meets different characters along the way. It was very action-packed. I felt like a lot happened in this book, and you know, it was enough to keep my attention. It's not my favorite Stephen King book. I'm not super into fantasy, essentially, and the Territories is very much a sort of, do I want to say medieval style world? Like, it's very, you know, there's no technology, it's feudal, like, can you even call it feudal? It's a monarchy, and the monarchy is supposedly good. Anyway, however that works. It's essentially, I feel like I can essentially say it's the universe that's very similar to that of Eyes of the Dragon. I feel like that's a very comparable sort of universe. It's just not really my thing. But I didn't dislike it. I got through it. Like, this is a long book. Like, I had to have liked it, you know, enough. And I did. I liked how the characters interacted with each other. I felt like there was, you know, a big emotional through line. I wanted to see Jack succeed. I wanted to know everything that happened with his father and Morgan and his mother and all of that stuff. I feel like it really did have the trademarks of Stephen King, of these sort of deep backstories to people, you know, set in reality, and then they're then launched into, you know, well, here a fantasy situation, in his other ones like a horror situation, like a fantastical situation essentially. So there was a lot to like in that regard. But you know, I could definitely say that this dragged in places. I mean, this is like 760 pages. I couldn't believe how long the final sequence was. It was very much like, fight this one bad guy, fight this other bad guy who's exactly the same as the other bad guy, fight this version of this bad guy, fight the henchman of the biggest bad guy, fight the biggest bad guy, for ages. It just kept going and going and going and going. It was like, come on. So yeah, I think it could have done with an edit in my opinion, but you know, Stephen King is the king. I feel like his editors really never wanted to edit his books very much. I feel like I have to say that the depiction of black people is very odd in this, which I feel like isn't that strange for a, you know, Stephen King book in this time period of his writing. It's very magical. Speedy is the character predominantly that you see that is a person of colour in this book, and he, you know, I feel like the way that Speedy talks is portrayed in this very sort of stereotypical way, that which I think comes up a few times in Stephen King books. He's looking for a cadence, a black cadence if you want, so it's sort of, it's odd to read. I find it jarring to read. You know, Speedy is very much the gateway to the territories for Jack. He's very much what starts Jack's journey. But he doesn't really come with Jack on the journey. He's just sort of... It's interesting. I always feel with Stephen King, he does these like magical black characters, and he does magical disabled people, and I feel like the intent there, I think the intention is to actually showcase minorities, which is really weird. It's a really weird way to do it, and you know, one that we can look at and be like, nah, I don't do that. But you know, it comes up a lot in older books, especially older Stephen King books, so I just felt like I had to sort of talk about that a little bit. I ended up giving this book 3 stars because it was entertaining enough. I wanted to know what was going to happen, and for the most part it was pretty enjoyable, so that's why I gave that 3 stars. And I realised I completely forgot to say what I rated you. I gave that 4 stars because I really liked it. But okay, so I'd read The Talisman just at home for the couple of weeks that I was home after that camping trip, and then I went to Tasmania with my partner because that's where his family lives, and I took 2 books with me. I'd started Persuasion at home, but I took it with me because I hadn't finished it yet, and I really liked Persuasion by Jane Austen. So this is about Anne, and she had a relationship with a man called Captain Wentworth when she was in her early 20s, early 20s, when he proposed to her, her family friend, a woman really close to her family. Like, her mother had died, and this was like her mother's very good friend, so this woman was essentially a surrogate mother to her. She convinced her that it wasn't a good match because Captain Wentworth wasn't a man of means at the time, and she thought it wouldn't be in Anne's best interest. So Anne says no, and goes off to live a bit of a life. And now she's like 27, I think, and Captain Wentworth is back, and he has been in the Navy, and he's now captain, so he has become a man of means. And most of the book is Anne having to come to terms with what she let go, and sort of getting to know Captain Wentworth again, but as someone that she can't really pursue. I really like this book. I'm not usually one for a second chance romance, but if anyone's gonna persuade me, it's Jane Austen. What I really liked about this book was sort of an older protagonist, right? Like 27, not so much older. But usually in these books, the main characters are in their early 20s, and you know, they meet someone and a month later they're married. So this was nice. This really felt like mature people who've lived a little bit, making big decisions and coming to terms with past decisions and growing. And I think that was really nice to read. I feel like, you know, Anne is a quiet character, but I feel like she's very level-headed and very much come to terms with the consequences of her actions, essentially. She understands that Wentworth is going to pursue someone else because he doesn't think... Well, he thought she was interested in the past, and then she turned him down. So why would he think that she'd be interested now anyway? And, you know, unfortunately, it's normal in this sort of time period for a guy of any age to go for a woman in her early 20s. It's very, very normalized that if someone's looking to marry, that they're looking for a 20-year-old woman, essentially. I really like the way that all the things were revealed to the main characters. It felt relatively natural. Like, maybe there were some funny parts where somebody was like sitting behind a bush and then overheard a conversation, but for the most part it was people sort of hanging around, and then they'd overhear a conversation, they'd be like, oh, that's what's going on. And, you know, I liked that. I think that this is probably my second favourite Jane Austen. I was reading a Goodreads review on it where it was just like, oh, and you know, the sophisticated choice for favourite Jane Austen novel is obviously Persuasion. I'm like, well, yeah, it's good, but for me, nothing can beat Pride and Prejudice, because, you know, so much happens in Pride and Prejudice. It's drama, 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 and I love that. Like, there's definitely drama in here, but, you know, it's different drama. The funny thing I find about Jane Austen novels is, you know, she'll do dodgy reveals. You've got a character who shows up who just knows so much about a situation because they've known such and such 10 years ago or whatever. And what I find really funny is you sort of have the conclusion, you have the love interest come and declare their love, and the main character accept it, and then you're like, ooh, the other guy that was pursuing her is going to be so mad. But then you don't, that never comes back. They're just out of the book once the conclusion comes in, which feels a little bit unfinished, but it's the way that she writes. So maybe it's the style at the time, or maybe it's gentlemanly to back down once, you know, she's engaged. I mean, that makes sense. But when you're portraying these characters as maybe like evil characters, it seems really wild to me that they wouldn't try and push back. But I mean, it doesn't stop me from enjoying the book. I really, really enjoyed this book. And I'm looking forward to reading more Jane Austen. I love reading Jane Austen. I'll read all of them. Yeah, 4 stars for this one. Essentially, the one missing star is because it's not Pride and Prejudice. I'm crazy for Pride and Prejudice. But this one, very, very, very good. The next book I read, I was still in Tasmania, so I was just sort of reading whenever I had some free time. And the next book that I took was Dead 11 by Juliano. This book is about a guy who finds out that his sister has gone missing from an island off Wisconsin Store, County Peninsula. Yeah. Wisconsin Store, County Peninsula. And he wants to know what's happened to her and goes after her to find out what's happened. This fell a bit flat for me, so I feel like there was a lot of good concepts going around. So the cover is so sick. It's even blurbed by R.L. Stine. Cool. That's cool. And you know, the idea that there's an island where everybody's pretending it's 1994, like, that's very, very fun sort of concept and right up my alley. Where it sort of fell flat was in the execution. I didn't think that the mixed media stuff really worked super well. Like, the letters were alright, but the we had these like recordings of interview, which I guess were okay. There was like a recording of interview between Willow and her future husband, which sort of set up their dynamic, I suppose, and how they met. I don't know if it really felt super necessary, but there was that. What I really didn't like was the text between Lily and Connor. I thought that was so unnecessary. Like, it was a lot of like, you know, thanks, we'll see, haha, thanks, wow, really, lol, neato, yeah. Like, it felt very filler. Like, when you look at these, between these 2 pages, there's like 50 words. Like, if it didn't have that, this would be a much shorter book. This is already not a crazy long book, like it's 450-ish pages, but we have these big chunks of just single word lines or, you know, replies or just barely any. It was odd. I didn't like it, and it just felt gimmicky. It just felt gimmicky, honestly. And I just accidentally flipped to a bit I didn't like. So I didn't mind the multiple perspectives. I thought that was alright. I didn't really feel like the characters were that differentiated between each other, that the different perspectives really gave that much. But what I didn't like about the different perspectives is, okay, so this is set up as if it's sort of a compendium of every bit of information that the main character has gathered. So it's just like, note to reader, this is everything that I got after my sister disappeared. But there is one perspective in here that is very much a perspective that he could never have got himself. That really annoyed me. It made me need to suspend my disbelief beyond something reasonable. We find something out in this book that, again, I thought was really unreasonable for my suspension of disbelief. Like, I don't want to be the person who's like, I had to suspend my disbelief while reading? Like, yeah, it's not real, it's fiction. But you have to adhere to the rules of the universe that you've created. You can't just go beyond it to make the story... Well, I guess he was trying to make elements of the story make sense, but it didn't make it make sense. It gave me more questions that were just not answered, and pissed me off. It annoyed me. I didn't like that perspective shoved in. I didn't like having to believe this was bigger than it was. It's supposed to be insular, right? So why try and expand that? Anyway, I feel like I'm not explaining that super well because I don't want to give like a spoiler away. But this was very easy to get through, and I would honestly recommend it to anybody who thinks the premise sounds interesting. I think it's not necessarily not worth the time. I think there's just a lot of stuff that I can critique about it, but you know, it's a fun concept. This may even be his debut. Yeah, this is his debut, so I am genuinely interested to see what else he does, and hopefully he can hone his craft a little bit better. I ended up giving that book 3 stars because, you know, I liked it enough. Yeah, it was good enough. I just wanted a little bit more. Okay, the next book I read was And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. I grabbed this one when I was in Tasmania, actually. I bought it at a bookshop. I grabbed this one because my mum and I were going to go see the play, which we since have now. That was her Christmas gift that I bought for her, was tickets to see And Then There Were None. And I wanted to read the book before I saw the play, and this ruled. This was so good. This makes me want to read more Agatha Christie books, because when I was in high school, I read some like illustrated, condensed versions of Agatha Christie books, which were very fun, but you know, I want to read like the full proper things now, and this I enjoyed so much. I love mysteries and thrillers, and I think one of the reasons that might be is because I am terrible at guessing whodunit. I'm just along for the ride. I can't figure anything out. I make a lousy detective. But yeah, this ride was so much fun. This is about 10 people who are invited to an island for, they think different reasons, because they've all gotten letters from different people. Someone, an old friend who said they're going to be on this island for this time, or someone they had met at this thing and they're going to go to this island, and we should hang out and do all this stuff. We've been invited by Mr. and Mrs. Owen, and they go to this island expecting a holiday, expecting fun, and what happens is they start getting killed off one by one, and they have to figure out what's going on. And it was so good. That's what I could say. It was just so fun. Really fun. I was concerned when I started reading that it was 10 different characters. Like, that's a lot of characters to keep up with, like 10 distinctive characters. To follow is quite a lot. But I found the descriptions of them distinct enough and interesting enough that I was actually following along quite well with who was who, which I thought was really impressive. The kills were wild. So there's a poem that they're reading along with that their deaths are following in the book. So it's like 10 little soldier boys went out to dine, one choked his little self, and then there were 9. So the first character to die chokes, and then so on. And so it was really fun. It was really fun trying to guess everything that was going to happen to these characters. Because, there's a bit that's like 3 little soldier boys walking in the zoo, a big bear hugged one, and then there were 2. And it's like, well, how's that going to work? Why would there be a bear on this British island? It was really fun like that. And then there was once 4 little soldier boys going out to sea, a red herring swallowed one, and then there were 3. So, if you read mysteries, the red herring is, what's going to throw you off the scent. So I knowing that there was a red herring coming, I was just like, oh, can I get that bit? Which was really fun. I just felt like it was just really masterfully put together. I certainly recommend this for anybody who likes, mystery thrillers. This is, from Agatha Christie, like the Queen herself, like, this just makes me want to read so many more Agatha Christie novels because it was just so good. I ended up giving this 4 stars, again, because maybe just a couple of places where it dragged a little bit, but for the most part, I would really widely recommend this because it was just so much fun. And the play was amazing as well. Even though I knew everything that was going to happen, it was in Melbourne, and the set was just beautiful and so compelling, and the actors were fantastic, and me and Mum had a really great night out. So definitely recommend that, and if there's a play of it near you as well, I reckon go watch that as well. Okay, so the last book I want to talk about is Moby Dick. I don't know where my Kindle is right now. I've just moved, so I've clearly put it somewhere strange because I don't know where it is. But the last book that I read in February was Moby Dick, and this is what really slowed me down. I think it took me maybe 3 weeks to read Moby Dick. Moby Dick is not easy to read. And I feel like I'm just going to find it really hard to talk about. Anyway, the story of Moby Dick is that there's a guy called Ishmael, call me Ishmael. He suddenly wants to go to sea. He gets the feeling that he has this whole thing about when he gets restless, he feels like he needs to go to sea. So he wants to join a whaling ship and see what that's all about, essentially. So it starts off and he's sort of heading towards the port, and he stays in boarding place for a little bit, but it doesn't really have a lot of room, so he ends up having to share with this guy called Queequeg, who is from an island called Cockavoco, also known as Rockavoco, which is a made-up island, so it's sort of hard to really gauge where he's supposed to be from. But this, what I'm looking at, also says an island far away to the west and south, and they're guessing the South Pacific Ocean. So he gets referred to as a savage a lot. And when they first meet, it's like Ishmael is like, oh no, I don't want to have to share a room with this savage. What am I gonna do? Oh my god. And they first meet and Ishmael's like in the bed, and Queequeg hasn't been told that there's going to be a guy in his bed, so he comes in and he attacks him essentially. And the landlord, like the tavern owner, has to come and like clear things up, and Queequeg's like, oh cool, no worries. And Ishmael's like, wow, I really underestimated this guy. And it's very funny, like he changed, like it's a long chapter of him being like, oh my god, I can't believe it, oh no, oh no, oh no, and then just like it ends on, man, I was wrong, I was so wrong. It was just, it's quite funny. And then they spend the next few chapters like getting to know each other and getting really close, and you know, Queequeg ends up being like, you're my wife, Ishmael. And they have this very interesting relationship. Then they spend the next few chapters like getting kind of into like hijinks and stuff. Like they go to this restaurant and annoy this lady, and you know, they eat a lot of food, and then they end up where they need to be, and talk to the captains about getting onto the boat, which they do. It takes a little while for them to like set off because we're introduced to all the characters, and that's sort of where the fun ends. I really enjoyed like Ishmael and Queequeg getting to know each other and getting into like silly situations. Like there's this one bit like where, well, it's always funny to me in a book where someone doing like washing their face or something is referred to as doing their toilet. That's so funny to me. But there's a part where like Ishmael is like watching Queequeg do his toilet, and it involves him using his harpoon to shave his face, which is just so funny. And then there's like other bits about how Queequeg doesn't want to eat anything except rare steak, and he like grabs his rare steak again with his harpoon, like the steak on the table, uses his harpoon like to get it. Like it's like silly, like it's silly, and like being from the perspective of someone watching it, like it's funny, and they have this very cute relationship. But when they actually get on the whaling ship, it just changes. And it's like the longest chapter in this book is a chapter about Ishmael just naming every sea creature. Not even every sea creature, but it feels like every sea creature, every like whale and whale-like creature he can think of, and it is so boring. And I hate to say that because I really wanted to love this book, and there were these parts where that really hit that I thought was so fun, and then you just get something like that and it just made me not want to read at all. Like it was such a slog. Trying to get in.
Well, I didn't actually invite you in, brother.
I'm actually a bit busy in here. You can come back later. You can say hello to the camera. It's Christmas. Christmas. Come on, buddy. Yeah, anyway, those bits were just a slog. And then you get to the actual whaling bits, and this is just my naivety. I was just really surprised by how graphic the scenes of like cutting up whales was. Like it was gross. And again, not very enjoyable to read. It was just kind of yucky. And you know, I can sort of understand the intention with these bits that I don't like. Like I think it probably is pretty important to describe this disgusting cutting up of the whales, to show that, you know, this thing that Ishmael wants to do is, you know, not sunshine and rainbows. It's not fun like he's sort of expecting it is. It's dangerous, it's gross, it's, you know, it's hard. It's a hard life. And you know, him explaining the whales, like I really feel that's like showing him as this green character, like he's read books, but he's not experienced much. And that's sort of the juxtaposition that you're given. And, you know, he has to learn the lessons, and, you know, he does. That's why I find it really hard to talk about this book, because I think there's so much in it that's interesting and stuff to analyze, and the relationship between Queequeg and Ishmael is crazy, but it's so good. But I didn't have a good time reading this book. I didn't enjoy reading this book, unfortunately. It was difficult, it was long, it was 135 chapters. I recommend this book to people who can just keep reading, who are good at finishing books, because when you finish a 135 chapter book, you feel good about yourself. But you know, there's 100% people out there who love this book. I'm not necessarily sure who they are and how to recommend them to people. So in the end, I've decided not to rate the book, because I just wouldn't know where to start. So yeah, I've read Moby Dick. I can say that I've read Moby Dick, because I have. And it was hard, it was really hard. Anyway, that was the 6 books I read in January and February. I'm looking forward to some more books. What was that? It was 4 books off my TBR of 18 books, so I'm really, really happy with that. So that was 4 books off my TBR and 2 extras. 4 of 18 books, so I'm doing pretty well. I'm really happy with that, and I'm looking forward to keep going with my TBR. I have this little shelf in my office that I put all my TBR on. So this is what it's looking like. Anyway, thank you for watching. Bye!